Michael Harris thought it was just another freezing night alone in his old pickup, until he saw a wounded German shepherd limping through the snow by the abandoned railway. When he wrapped his only coat around the trembling dog, he didn't know this simple act would lead him to a dying man chained inside a forgotten cabin. A man who carried a secret that could save or destroy the town. What they would uncover beneath that snow would prove that even in the coldest nights, God still leaves a light burning for those who believe. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and may God bless everyone watching tonight. Chapter 1. Meeting in the Snowstorm. The night fell heavy with snow, swallowing the town of Cold Creek in a curtain of white silence. Wind howled through the half-dead pines, sweeping across the abandoned railway yard where a single rusted freight car sat frozen in time. Inside an old blue pickup truck parked nearby, Michael Harris rubbed his hands together for warmth, his breath fogging the cracked windshield. He was 49, broad-shouldered but weathered, the kind of man whose face carried the map of years spent outdoors. Creases of hardship carved deep around his eyes, a beard that had grown in unevenly from neglect, and calloused hands that once fixed things for others but now trembled slightly from hunger and cold. He had once been a carpenter before the mill closed, before the town started dying piece by piece. Since then, work had been patchy, odd jobs, hauling scrap, sleeping in the truck when motels were too much to afford. He wasn't bitter, not yet, but there was a slow ache inside him, a mix of shame and weariness that only men who've fallen quietly out of society seem to know. That night, he thought about driving south, maybe to find construction work before the real winter hit. But then, above the wind, came a faint whimper. It was so soft he thought at first it was the wind squeezing through the train rails. Then it came again, clearer this time, raw and desperate. Michael turned off the truck engine and listened. The sound was coming from near the loading ramp. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out, boots crunching through the snow that had already swallowed his tire tracks. At the edge of the rail yard lay a shape, dark against the white. He knelt down, brushing snow from a furred body. It was a German shepherd, big but emaciated, its furs matted and dusted with ice. One shoulder was slick with blood from a deep gash. Its ribs showed through its coat, and its eyes, amber and alert even through pain, watched him with that mixture of suspicion and plea only an animal in survival mode can have. "Easy, boy," Michael murmured. His voice was rough but gentle. The dog flinched when he touched the wound but didn't bite. "You've been out here too long." He hesitated, then peeled off his flannel jacket, his only real layer against the cold, and tore the sleeve with his teeth, pressing it against the gash. The bleeding slowed. The dog shivered violently, so he carried it, heavy, limp, and cold as stone, back to the truck. Inside, he started the engine again, turned the heat up full, and laid the dog on a blanket. "You're one tough bastard," he muttered, watching it breathe in short, shallow bursts. "Guess we're both hanging by a thread tonight." The dog's tail twitched once, almost like it understood. Michael smiled faintly, though his chest ached at the sight. He had no money for a vet, not even for himself, but he couldn't leave the animal to die. Hours passed. Outside, the snow thickened into a storm. Inside, the heater coughed weak air, and Michael dozed off leaning against the window. When he woke, the dog had shifted, its head resting on his boot, eyes open and alert. "Well, you made it through the night," he said. "That's something." The dog lifted its head, ears twitching toward the distant sound of a train horn echoing through the valley. It let out a low, mournful whine, then stood on shaky legs, looking out the window as if searching for something, or someone. Its focus was unnerving, almost human. Michael followed its gaze, nothing but snow and tracks disappearing into fog. "You waiting for someone?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't move. It just stood there, staring into the storm, its breath fogging the glass. By morning, the storm had calmed, leaving a pale blue stillness over the yard. Michael stepped outside to stretch, snow creaking under his boots. When he returned, the passenger door was open. The dog was gone. "Buddy!" he called instinctively, though he hadn't named it yet. No answer, just the whistle of the wind. He sighed, shoulders sinking, and climbed into the driver's seat. He was about to start the engine when a movement caught his eye. The dog trotted up the snowy path, tail wagging weakly. Something clamped in its jaws. It dropped the object onto Michael's lap. A handkerchief, embroidered with the initials H.L. faintly stained with dried blood. Michael frowned. "Where'd you get this?" The dog looked up at him expectantly, then nudged the handkerchief again, as if urging him to understand. He turned the fabric over, fine cotton, too delicate to belong to anyone living rough. The edges were frayed, but the blood was fresh enough that it hadn't yet turned brown. His stomach knotted with unease. "Someone hurt?" he asked under his breath, scanning the tracks stretching into the woods. The dog whined, pawing at the ground, glancing toward the trees. "Not today," Michael muttered. He'd already done enough good deeds for 1 week, hadn't he? But something in the dog's eyes, a silent, pleading intelligence, unsettled him. He folded the handkerchief and pocketed it. "All right, we'll check it out tomorrow. You and me." Later that morning, they stopped by Grace's Diner, the only open place in town, its neon sign buzzing weakly in the daylight. The bell above the door jingled when Michael walked in, the dog at his heel. Every head turned. Stray dogs weren't welcome inside, but Grace merely raised an eyebrow. Grace Bennett was 52, tall and lean with silver streaks running through her chestnut hair, tied back in a loose bun. Her skin was lined but radiant, the kind of beauty that comes from kindness more than youth. She'd been running the diner since her husband passed 5 winters ago, keeping it afloat with grit and grace, feeding half the town on credit when they couldn't pay. Her eyes, gray-green and sharp as glass, softened when she saw the dog's bandaged shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, coming around the counter. "What happened to him?" "Found him by the tracks," Michael said. "Took a bad hit from something, knife maybe. He's breathing, though." Grace crouched beside the dog, running gentle fingers near the wound. "You did a good job patching him up. Here, wait." She disappeared into the back and returned with a small first aid kit. "This'll help with infection, free of charge." Michael shook his head. "Can't take charity." "It's not charity, it's decency," she said, meeting his eyes firmly. He noticed how steady her gaze was, no pity, just a quiet understanding that unnerved him more than the storm had. "You look like you've been through worse." He chuckled dryly. "You could say that." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe you and that dog were meant to find each other." Michael didn't answer. He was watching the dog, who had laid down beside the stool, eyes half closed, but ears twitching toward every sound, ready to leap if danger came. There was a soldier's alertness in that posture, something trained, not born. "Got a name for him?" Grace asked. "Not yet. He sort of showed up last night. Then maybe he'll tell you his name when he's ready." Michael looked at her, about to make a joke, but something in her tone silenced him. He took the medicine, nodded his thanks, and left a few crumpled dollars on the counter. Outside, the wind had died, and the world seemed too still. Buddy, he decided to call him that, walked beside him quietly, head low, eyes scanning the distant line of trees where the tracks vanished. Michael glanced down at his new companion and felt an odd certainty he hadn't felt in years. That this dog wasn't just a stray. He had come from somewhere, and maybe, just maybe, he was leading Michael back towards something he'd lost long ago. As they reached the truck, Buddy suddenly stopped, growling low in his throat. Michael followed his gaze and froze. In the snow just beyond the tree line stood a man's boot, half buried, unmoving, with the faint trace of blood trailing toward the woods. Buddy whined softly, tail stiff. Michael's breath caught. "What the hell?" he whispered, stepping closer. The boot was empty, but beside it, pressed into the snow, were fresh paw prints, not Buddy's. Chapter 2. The marks along the tracks. The morning sun hung pale and distant, barely touching the frozen ridges that framed Cold Creek. The storm had left the town bruised and quiet, every rooftop buried under white, every breath turning to frost before it reached the air. Michael Harris stood by the edge of the tree line, staring down at the half-buried boot from last night. The snow around it was disturbed, patterned with paw prints not belonging to Buddy. Bigger, heavier, as if a larger dog, or perhaps a wolf, had been here recently. Buddy stood alert beside him, fur bristling, nose twitching toward the faint scent of something molt and metallic that lingered between the trees. "All right, boy," Michael muttered, pulling his coat tighter. "Let's see where this takes us." They followed the tracks along the old railway, now a ghostly scar cutting through the woods. The steel rails had long rusted, swallowed by moss and snow, but the ties were still visible beneath thin white crusts. Every few yards, Buddy would stop, sniff the air, then press onward. Michael noticed faint chalk markings scrawled on the wooden ties, small white X's that led deeper into the forest. They weren't random. Someone had marked a trail. Hours passed. The cold gnawed at his fingers, and his boots were soaked through. But Buddy remained tireless, his breath puffing out steady clouds, his steps sure. Michael wondered what kept the dog moving with such certainty, instinct or memory. Around noon, the forest thinned, opening to a small clearing where an abandoned maintenance shack leaned crookedly against a snowbank. Its roof sagged inward, and the once red paint had peeled to gray. Smoke, or what had once been smoke, had stained the chimney black. Buddy stopped dead, ears pricked forward, tail stiff. "You smell something?" Michael whispered. Buddy gave a low growl, short and guttural. Michael approached slowly, pushing open the warped door. The hinges groaned like something alive. The stench hit first: metal, oil, and the faint, sickly sweetness of something decaying. Inside, the room was small, maybe 10 feet across, cluttered with rusted tools, broken lanterns, and a cold gas stove. Against the far wall lay a man, slumped on the floor, his wrist handcuffed to a pipe. His skin was ashen, lips cracked blue, breath faint but visible. "Jesus," Michael muttered, dropping to his knees. He felt for a pulse, weak, but there. The man stirred at his touch, lids fluttering open to reveal eyes the color of old whiskey. "Who's there?" the man rasped. "My name's Michael Harris," he said softly. "You're safe, sir. I'm gonna get you some heat." The man swallowed hard, throat working painfully. He looked to be in his late 70s, gaunt face, gray beard tangled against his coat collar, the deep lines of labor and stubborn pride etched into his skin. His hands were big but swollen with cold, fingernails rimmed with black grease. His clothes, heavy wool trousers and a patched flannel, suggested an old working man, maybe one of those who had built the rails that now lay dead in the snow. "Name's Henry," the man murmured. "Henry Lawson." Michael unclipped his multi-tool and pried at the handcuff. It wouldn't budge. He cursed under his breath, looking around. The small gas stove sat dead, the tank beside it empty. A metal cup lay overturned, frozen water still glinting inside. "Who did this to you, Henry?" Henry's eyes darted toward the door, fear flickering in their depths. "Man. Said he'd be back. Wanted papers. Said they belonged to him now." "What papers?" "The depot deeds," Henry breathed. "Cold Creek Depot. It ain't his to sell. Belongs to the town. My father helped build it. And He coughed violently, and Michael steadied him. "All right, easy now. Don't talk." Michael glanced at his phone. No signal. The storm had killed the network out here. He set the phone aside and reached for his pack. A few protein bars, a flask of whiskey, and the survival blanket he always carried. He wrapped Henry in the foil sheet and poured a few drops of whiskey into a tin cup. "Here, small sips." Henry obeyed, his hand trembling. Buddy moved closer, curling his body along Henry's legs, his thick fur pressing warmth into the man's frozen limbs. Henry smiled weakly, fingers brushing the dog's ear. "Good boy," he whispered. Michael worked quickly. He tore apart old wooden crates and fed them into the stove, striking a spark with his lighter until a small flame caught. The orange glow filled the shack, casting trembling shadows across the peeling walls. "Tell me about this man," Michael has said quietly. Henry closed his eyes. "Derek Shaw, big shot from Denver. Came last month, said he bought the depot from the county. But it was a lie. The papers he has, fake. I've got the real ones." He coughed again, eyes rolling back. "He found out. Came for them. I told him I'd never sell. He locked me up. Took my phone. Said I'd freeze before anyone noticed." Michael felt a surge of anger he hadn't felt in years. "Where are the papers now?" Henry's hand trembled as he pointed toward the corner. "Under the floorboard, beneath the oil drum." Michael pried up the planks. Beneath them was a small metal lockbox, cold and scratched. He lifted it gently, brushing away ice. "This what he wanted?" Henry nodded weakly. "Town deeds. And proof he bribed the assessor." Michael's gut tightened. He didn't care much about politics, but he'd seen what greed could do, how people like Derek Shaw thrived while men like Henry froze in forgotten corners of the world. "We'll get you out of here," he said firmly. Henry's eyes fluttered open again. "Careful," he whispered. "He said he'd come back tonight." Michael hesitated. "Then we'd better not be here when he does." Outside, the wind had started to rise again, bringing the smell of more snow. He dragged an old tarp from the wall and wrapped it around Henry, securing it with rope. "You think you can stand?" "Barely." "Buddy, stay close." The dog trotted ahead, scouting the path as they moved through the trees. Every few yards, Buddy would pause, glance back, and keep moving forward, nose low to the ground. The forest seemed to close around them, branches sagging under the weight of snow, the air thick with silence. By the time they reached the old rail junction, Henry was shivering violently despite the layers. Michael stopped under a half-collapsed signal tower, lowering him gently to the ground. "We'll rest here a minute." Henry's breath came in gasps. "He'll find us," he murmured. "Let him try," Michael said, voice low but steady. He poured the last of his whiskey into the cup, offering it to him again. Buddy whined suddenly, staring down the track toward the distance. A faint glint caught Michael's eye, a car headlight, far off, weaving slowly through the trees. Henry saw it too. "He's early," he whispered, voice breaking. Michael's pulse quickened. He grabbed the lockbox, stuffed it into his pack, and doused the small fire they'd built for heat. "Buddy, heel." The dog moved to his side, muscles coiled, silent. The vehicle drew closer, its engine muffled by snow. A black SUV, tires crunching softly, stopped at the edge of the clearing. The door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, clean-cut, wearing a long black coat and leather gloves. Even at a distance, his presence radiated arrogance. Michael recognized him instantly, though they'd never met. Everything about the man screamed money, power, and danger. Derek Shaw, the name Henry had whispered in fear. Buddy growled, low and steady. Michael placed a hand on his neck, feeling the vibration of tension beneath the fur. Derek's voice carried through the cold air, smooth and unhurried. "Mr. Lawson," he called, "I told you I'd be back. I hope you've come to your senses." Henry tried to rise, but Michael pressed him gently down. The dog crouched beside them, eyes glowing in the pale light. "Stay quiet," Michael whispered. Snow fell between the trees in slow, heavy flakes. The SUV's headlights cast long shadows across the rails. Derek took a few steps closer, scanning the woods, his gloved hand brushing against the outline of a pistol beneath his coat. Then, as the silence deepened, Buddy suddenly tensed, ears snapping upright, his gaze fixed not on Derek, but somewhere behind them. Michael turned, heart hammering, and froze. From the opposite side of the clearing, another set of eyes gleamed amber through the trees. Low, deliberate breathing followed. Whatever it wasn't human. The snow around them stirred, and Buddy began to growl again, this time in warning. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Storm. The headlights carved 2 white tunnels through the snow, illuminating a ghostly corridor between the trees. Michael crouched beside Henry, his heart pounding in rhythm with the thud of blood in his ears. Buddy growled low, fur bristling, muscles coiled like wire. Across the clearing, Derek Shaw stood with one hand buried in the pocket of his long black coat, the other resting casually near the pistol beneath it. The man's face was cut from ambition. Clean-shaven jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, and a smile that didn't reach them. The storm ruffled his slick hair, but he didn't flinch. He looked like someone who had never truly been cold a day in his life. Behind him, the SUV's door opened again. A second man stepped out, his presence heavier, rougher. He was in his 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a crooked nose that looked long since broken, and a beard that failed to hide the scar cutting down his cheek. He wore a military-style jacket, boots still dusted with city grime. His name, as Derek soon called him, was Clint Riker, a former security guard with a record for excessive force. There was something almost mechanical about the way he moved, efficient and brutal, like someone who'd been trained to hurt first and think later. Derek spoke in that calm, velvety tone only men of wealth can master. "Mr. Lawson, I'm sure this isn't how you wanted things to go. You're freezing, old man. I have a warm car, a doctor waiting in town. Let's not make this any harder." Henry's chapped lips trembled. "You locked me in there to die." Derek sighed, feigning regret. "You were being unreasonable. I only want what's fair." His gaze shifted toward Michael. "And who might you be? A friend of the family? Or just another vagrant playing hero?" Michael straightened, snow crunching beneath his boots. "I'm just someone who doesn't leave old men to die in the cold." Derek's smirk deepened. Noble, but misplaced. He nodded toward Clint, who began circling the clearing. Buddy moved instantly, blocking his path, teeth bared. Clint stopped, assessing the animal. "Big dog," he muttered, voice gravelly. "Too bad." "Don't," Derek said smoothly, though his eyes glinted with irritation. "Let's not make a mess." Michael felt Henry's weak hand clutch his arm. "Don't trust him," the old man whispered. "He'll shoot you both." "Not if we end this quick," Michael murmured back. He took one slow step forward. "You want the box, right?" He patted his backpack lightly. "Then take it. Just let the old man go." Derek tilted his head, studying him. "You think I'm that stupid?" His tone softened, dangerous. "You hand over the papers, you're free to go. But the old man, he's too much trouble. He knows too much." Buddy's growl deepened, echoing like thunder under the storm. Michael exhaled. Slowly, every instinct screaming, "You're not taking him!" The air seemed to crack as Clint lunged forward. Buddy moved first, lightning in fur. The dog's jaws clamped down on Clint's forearm, a savage twist pulling him off balance. The man roared in pain, swinging wildly. Derek cursed, drawing his pistol, but Michael was already moving. He slammed into Derek, the two men crashing against the SUV. The gun went off, the shot lost in the storm's howl. "Buddy, heel!" Michael shouted. The dog obeyed instantly, retreating to his side, muzzle bloody but eyes burning. Clint staggered back, clutching his arm. "You son of a—" Before he could finish, Derek grabbed the fallen lantern from the SUV's hood and hurled it toward them. The glass shattered, spilling oil across the snow. In seconds, the fire caught, racing along the ground, licking up the wooden beams of the nearby maintenance shack. "Jesus," Michael hissed, turning to see the orange glow erupting behind them. The flames devoured the dry boards, spreading faster than wind. Inside, sparks caught the old propane tank Henry had mentioned earlier. Michael's stomach dropped. Derek's face, lit by firelight, looked almost inhuman, beautiful, cruel, and absolutely certain of victory. "Looks like you're out of time, hero," he said, stepping back toward the SUV. "Let the forest bury what's left." He motioned for Clint to follow, but Clint, furious and humiliated, grabbed a crowbar from the car's trunk. "I'll finish this," he growled, charging through the firelight. Michael didn't think, he reacted. He ducked under the swing and drove his shoulder into Clint's gut, the crowbar spinning into the snow. Clint recovered fast, slamming a fist into Michael's jaw. Pain exploded through his skull. He stumbled, barely catching himself. Buddy leapt again, tearing at Clint's coat, forcing the man down. "Buddy, no!" Michael yelled, dragging the dog back before Clint could reach the gun, half buried nearby. "Go!" he shouted at Henry. "Move!" The old man tried to rise, trembling. Michael caught him under the arm, half dragging him toward the tracks. Behind them, the shack gave a deep, groaning sound, the propane tank expanding under the heat. Then it happened. A burst like thunder, the explosion ripping through the clearing. The shockwave sent snow and flame spiraling skyward. Michael felt himself lifted, then thrown into the drifts. His ears rang, vision swimming. When he opened his eyes, Buddy was standing over him, barking desperately. Smoke and sparks filled the air. Derek's SUV was gone, retreated into the trees. Clint was nowhere in sight. Michael coughed, tasting blood, and looked around for Henry. "Henry!" A weak moan answered from a few yards away. Michael scrambled over, shaking snow off the old man's body. He was alive, barely, but conscious. "You all right?" Henry nodded faintly. "You should have run. Not my style," Michael said hoarsely. He pulled the tarp tighter around him, shielding them both from falling embers. Buddy barked twice, sharp and focused. He was facing the forest edge again, nose high. Through the haze, Michael caught the faint glint of headlights. Then nothing. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his old CB radio, cracked and dusty but still functional. He hadn't used it since his construction days, but it powered on with a faint hum. He pressed the button. "This is Michael Harris, North Ridge by Cold Creek Junction. We've got a fire, one injured, possible assault suspect. Repeat, urgent medical needed." Static. Then, faintly, a voice, female, steady, and unmistakable. "Michael, say again, Cold Creek Junction, over." His breath caught. "Grace? Grace Bennett?" "Yes." "Who else do you think keeps the emergency channel alive in this town?" Her voice was calm but concerned. "You all right?" "Not even close," he said, glancing at Henry. "We need help. Fire, injuries, maybe more coming." "I'm calling SAR now. Hold tight, you hear me? Michael smiled weakly. You always this bossy? Only when men do stupid things. Keep that radio on. The signal crackled out, but the connection, brief as it was, felt like oxygen in the smoke-choked air. He looked down at Henry. You're gonna make it, old man. You hear me? Henry gave a faint smile. Didn't think anyone still cared. Guess you were wrong, Buddy whined softly, curling up beside them, his body shielding Henry from the wind. The glow of the fire painted the snow in shifting amber light, a strange, fragile warmth amid destruction. Michael sat there, jaw throbbing, lungs burning, and thought of Grace's voice, steady as a heartbeat. Then, from somewhere beyond the flickering tree line, a low engine rumbled. Not Derek's SUV, something heavier, slower. The sound came closer, headlights appearing faintly through the snow. Rescue team, Michael muttered, but Buddy's ears went back. His growl, deep and uncertain, said otherwise. See. Chapter 4. The Chase by the River Docks. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed in cold blue silence. Smoke still curled from the ruined shack behind them, twisting into the pale dawn. Michael squinted through the haze as the low growl of the engine grew nearer. Buddy stood stiff beside him, every muscle alert, eyes gleaming in the dim light. The vehicle emerged from the tree line, a sheriff's truck, battered but sturdy, its roof lights flashing faint red through the fog. Relief surged through Michael like a tide breaking. The driver's door opened, and Sheriff Nolan Briggs stepped out, a man in his mid-50s with the broad frame of someone who had spent decades working outdoors. His short salt-and-pepper hair was hidden beneath a faded cowboy hat, and deep creases cut across his tanned face. His beard was trimmed close, and his eyes, sharp and amber like burnt whiskey, missed nothing. He carried the quiet weight of authority, the kind earned from years of seeing the worst of people and still choosing to believe in the best. His limp, faint but noticeable, came from an old bullet wound, something everyone in Cold Creek had heard about, but few dared ask him to retell. Michael Harris, he said, voice gravelly but not unkind. Heard your voice over the radio. Hell of a mess you've stirred up. Michael stood, brushing ash from his jacket. Didn't have much of a choice. Man named Derek Shaw tried to kill this old-timer. He gestured toward Henry, who was slumped against a tree, barely conscious. Briggs nodded grimly. We've been after Shaw for weeks. Fraud, forgery, land theft. Slippery bastard. He turned toward his deputy, a young woman named Tina Morales, no older than 30, small and sharp-featured, with olive skin and a black braid coiled under her hat. Get the med kit, Morales. We'll stabilize him here. Tina knelt beside Henry with quiet efficiency, wrapping gauze around his hands. Michael could see the worry etched on her brow, though she tried to hide it. Henry stirred weakly, gripping Michael's sleeve. He took it, he whispered. The box. He's got it again. Michael froze. What? The lockbox, Henry croaked. He came back. Took it while you were out. Briggs cursed under his breath. Which way? Henry's eyes fluttered open. Toward the river docks. Old Warehouse Road. Briggs turned to Michael. We'll track him. Stay with the medics. But Michael was already shaking his head. I'm coming. Not a good idea, Briggs warned. You're bleeding. Michael wiped at the blood on his lip, ignoring it. That box has proof he's been scamming the whole county. I'm not letting him vanish again. Buddy barked once, as if seconding the decision. Briggs studied them for a moment, then sighed. Fine, but you follow my lead. The sheriff's truck roared back to life, tires skidding on the ice as they sped down the narrow forest road toward the docks. The river lay just beyond town, a wide frozen artery threading between cliffs and old industrial ruins. Once, it had carried coal and timber. Now, it was just a graveyard of rusted containers and warehouses that the town couldn't afford to tear down. As they neared the water, Buddy pressed his nose to the window, whining. Michael's heart thumped. He's got a scent, he said. Briggs pulled over, cutting the engine. Then we go on foot. The wind bit through their coats as they crossed the cracked pavement. The smell of oil and river mud thick in the air. Buddy darted ahead, leading them between stacked cargo containers. His paws left clean prints on the frost, tail low but wagging slightly, focused. Then, from behind a line of old cranes came the echo of footsteps. Heavy, rushed. Michael signaled Briggs, who nodded, and moved quietly along the opposite flank. They rounded the corner just in time to see Derek Shaw sprinting toward the pier, the metal lockbox clutched tight under one arm. His once polished coat was ripped, and soot smeared across his face, but his eyes still glowed with the same cold ambition. "Derek!" Briggs shouted, his voice cutting through the wind. "Drop it! You're done!" Derek turned, pistol flashing in his hand. He fired once. The bullet ricocheted off the crane, sparking. Buddy barked furiously, lunging forward. Michael dove behind a container, his pulse hammering. Briggs returned fire. 2 shots, measured and clean. Derek ducked, stumbling toward the far end of the dock, where the old bridge extended over the half-frozen water. The box slipped in his grasp. Michael saw his chance. "Buddy, go!" The dog bolted, powerful legs churning the snow. Derek turned too late. Buddy slammed into his side, teeth catching his sleeve. The man staggered, swore, and in the struggle the lockbox slipped from his hand. It tumbled over the edge, spinning once before vanishing into the black water below. "No!" Henry's voice echoed faintly from the truck behind them, carried by the wind. Derek shoved Buddy off, raising the gun again, but Michael was already moving. He tackled him from behind, the two of them crashing against the guardrail. The gun flew into the river. Derek fought like a man possessed, fists wild, shouting, "You think this town deserves saving? It's dying! It's worthless!" "Then why steal from it?" Michael roared back, pinning him against the railing. "If you hate it so much, leave it alone." For a moment, Derek's fury faltered. "Because it took everything from me," he hissed. "My father lost his land because of men like Lawson. You think I'm the villain? I'm just collecting what's owed." Michael's grip tightened. "You lost your humanity collecting debts that didn't exist." Derek swung again, catching Michael across the jaw. The pain burst like fire. Michael staggered, lost footing, then felt himself falling, backward toward the river. The icy air tore through him. "Michael!" Briggs shouted. He hit the water like glass. The shock of cold punched the air from his lungs. For a heartbeat, all he saw was darkness and bubbles. Then, Buddy plunged in after him. "Buddy!" he gasped through chattering teeth. The dog paddled toward him, barking, circling the spot where the lockbox had sunk. Through the dim light filtering from above, Michael saw the metal glint wedged under a beam. His chest screamed for air, but he dove. His fingers brushed the box, too heavy to lift alone, until Buddy swam beside him, grabbing the handle in his jaws. "Good boy," Michael wheezed, kicking upward. Together they broke the surface, gasping. Briggs was leaning over the dock, shouting orders. Tina was there too, tossing a rope. "Grab it!" Michael looped it around his wrist, clutching Buddy with the other hand. They hauled both man and dog up, shivering and soaked, collapsing onto the boards. The lockbox clanged beside them. Safe. Briggs strode forward, gun drawn. Derek Shaw had crawled to his knees, coughing and beaten. The sheriff pressed a boot to his chest, yanking the cuffs from his belt. "Derek Shaw, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, arson, and whatever else I can think of before coffee." Derek glared up at him, teeth chattering. "You think this changes anything?" Briggs leaned closer. "It changes enough." He snapped the cuffs closed. Michael lay flat on the dock, gasping for breath. Buddy limped over and dropped his head on Michael's chest, eyes half closed but content. "You're crazy, you know that?" Michael whispered, running a trembling hand through his soaked fur. The dog's tail thumped weakly in reply. Moments later, another set of headlights cut through the mist. Grace Bennett jumped from her truck, coat flapping in the wind, hair undone from its bun. Her cheeks were flushed from cold and worry. "Michael!" she cried, rushing forward. He sat up slowly, water dripping from his beard. "Hey," he managed, voice hoarse. "You missed the fun." Grace knelt beside him, tears mingling with snowflakes. "You could have died." "Yeah," he said softly, smiling faintly. "But we didn't." Briggs approached, nodding toward them. "Town owes you both. And that mutt, too." Grace looked at Buddy, who licked her hand as if understanding every word. The river shimmered behind them, the first light of dawn breaking across its surface. In that moment, between exhaustion and relief, Michael felt something shift, something warm breaking through the cold that had defined his life for too long. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the end of the chase, Buddy rested beside him, breathing steady. The storm had finally broken. Chapter 5. The lights of the depot. Spring crept into Cold Creek quietly, like a guest afraid to overstay its welcome. The snow melted from the rooftops, leaving puddles that reflected a gentler sky. The river, once locked in ice, now moved freely, whispering against the docks where everything had nearly ended. Michael Harris stood before the old railway depot, hands in his pockets, and took in what it had become. The cracked bricks were repainted, the broken windows replaced, and the sagging roof now crowned with a fresh coat of copper red. A new sign gleamed in the sunlight: Cold Creek Community Depot, built by many, saved by a few. Buddy sat beside him, his thick coat glossy now, a red scarf tied neatly around his neck. He was healthier, stronger, his eyes bright with that watchful Lyle spark. A faint scar still marked his shoulder, but it had become a part of him, just as the town's scars had become part of its story. Inside, the scent of coffee and fresh paint mingled with laughter. Tables were filled with townsfolk, old miners, young families, veterans, and volunteers, all helping to prepare for the grand opening that afternoon. The depot had been reborn, not as a place of departure, but as one of return. Henry Lawson sat in a wheelchair near the window, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. The winter had taken weight from him, but not the fire in his eyes. He looked up as Michael entered. "Well," he said, voice gravelly but warm, "you actually cleaned up pretty good, Harris." Michael grinned, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Didn't want to embarrass the new boss. Henry chuckled, waving a wrinkled hand. "You're the boss now, son. I'm just the old fool who almost froze to death." "You're more than that," Michael said. "You're the reason this place is standing." Henry leaned back, thoughtful. "Maybe, but you're the reason people believe in it again." His eyes softened. "Caroline would have liked you, you know. She always said the depot needed a man with calloused hands and a good heart. Took 50 years, but I guess she got her wish." Michael smiled quietly. He didn't say it aloud, but he had come to feel like he was part of Caroline's unfinished story, one that Henry was finally allowed to complete. Across the room, Grace Bennett directed a small army of volunteers in setting up the community kitchen. She wore a faded blue dress under her apron, hair pinned up loosely, with strands of silver glinting near her temples. Her face was flushed from activity, and her laughter carried easily. She moved with purpose, sleeves rolled up, as she organized trays of food for the grand opening. Beside her was Martha Jennings, a retired nurse in her late 60s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind square glasses. She'd spent her whole life in Cold Creek and was known for her blunt humor and lemon pies that could cure heartbreak. "Grace," Martha said, wiping her hands on a towel, "if you don't slow down, you'll drop dead before the ribbon gets cut." Grace laughed. "If I do, you'll have to resuscitate me. Don't think I've forgotten your training." Martha rolled her eyes but smiled. "You're lucky that man of yours is too polite to argue. Otherwise, he'd tie you to a chair until the ceremony." Grace's cheeks colored faintly, though she didn't answer. Michael had been helping her at the diner during the depot renovations, and somewhere between late nights and shared silences, something had taken root between them. Not a sudden spark, but a slow, deep warmth. It wasn't youth's reckless fire, but something steadier, more deliberate, like the quiet comfort of a fire that refuses to go out. By noon, the depot glowed with life. A local jazz trio tuned their instruments near the stage, and banners fluttered outside. Buddy trotted happily between guests, soaking up every pat and laugh. Children followed him, giggling as he carried a small flag in his mouth. Grace watched him with a smile. "He's become a bit of a celebrity." "Deservedly so," Michael said, joining her. "He saved more lives than I did." Grace looked at him sidelong. "You both did. Together." For a moment, their eyes held. Then Buddy barked, interrupting whatever unspoken thing hovered between them. Sheriff Nolan Briggs arrived next, hat in hand, his limp more noticeable, but his grin unshakable. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, surveying the depot. "Didn't think this place would ever shine again." "Don't give me too much credit," Michael said. "You're the one who dragged Derek into court." Briggs chuckled. "Yeah, and the DA's having a field day. Fraud, arson, attempted murder. He'll be lucky to see sunlight before he's 80. He paused, his tone softening. "You did good, Harris. This town needed a win." "Guess we all did," Michael said. When the clock struck 3, the ceremony began. The townspeople gathered outside beneath a sky streaked with soft gold. Henry held the ceremonial scissors in his frail hands, with Michael and Grace standing beside him. Buddy sat proudly in front, wearing a new blue vest embroidered with the words, "Community Rescue Ambassador." Henry cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly through the microphone. "For most of my life, this depot was a symbol of what we'd lost. Jobs, families, pride. But today, it's something else. It's proof that you can't kill a town that still believes in one another. This place belongs to all of us, to those who built it, those who saved it, and those who'll keep its light burning. Applause rippled through the crowd, soft at first, then stronger. Henry handed the scissors to Michael. "Do the honors, son." Michael hesitated, glancing at Grace. She nodded, smiling. He cut the ribbon, and the bell above the depot rang, a sound that echoed across the town, bright and clear. Buddy barked joyfully, tail wagging, as if he understood the meaning of it all. Inside, the celebration continued. The music swelled, and Grace started a dance in the middle of the floor. "Come on," she said, holding out her hand. Michael laughed. "I don't dance." "Then learn," she teased. He took her hand, rough and calloused, meeting soft and steady. They moved clumsily at first, then found a rhythm. The light from the depot windows washed over them, warm, forgiving. Around them, laughter and music filled the air, the kind of joy that comes not from perfection, but from survival. Later, as evening settled, Michael stepped outside for air. The depot's lights glowed behind him, reflected in the river below. Buddy joined him, leaning against his leg. "We made it, didn't we?" he murmured. The dog wagged his tail once, then rested his head on Michael's knee. From behind, Grace's voice drifted softly. "You look like a man who finally stopped running." He turned, smiling. "Maybe because I finally had something worth running toward." Grace stepped beside him, their shoulders brushing. Together they watched the lights shimmer across the water, the depot alive with laughter. Somewhere inside, Henry was telling stories to the children, and Briggs was probably losing at cards to Martha. Cold Creek had found its heartbeat again, and so had they. Buddy lifted his head, ears pricking as the depot bell rang one last time. The sound rolled through the night, clear, proud, and full of promise. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, on four tired paws, in the middle of a snowstorm. When Michael saved Buddy, he thought he was saving just one lost soul. But maybe, just maybe, God was using that moment to save two. Because love, whether it's between man and dog or neighbor and neighbor, is the way heaven reminds us we are never truly alone. Every act of kindness ripples outward, turning despair into hope and strangers into family. So, tonight, if you're watching this, say a prayer for the forgotten, the broken, and the brave. May God bless you for believing that goodness still walks this earth, sometimes on two legs, sometimes on four. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where faith, love, and second chances still have a home.